Hello everyone, this is part 2 of the second week videos of the 3 months data analyst roadmap, and today we are continuing the discussion of advanced Excel functions for data analytics. So the first function we are talking about is index function, and index function returns a value at a specified index. For example, we have a simple data set of 5 columns and 5 rows. If I say find me the value at index of this array, for example, I select this array and I say that give me value of index 4 in this array, and if I close parentheses, it says okay, the value at index 4 of this specific array is 12. So here E is at index 1, 18 at index 2, 38 at index 3, and 12 is index 4. So it returns 12. We can also give it an array of a row. For example, if I say that give me the value of a specified index at this array, which is a row, give me the value at index number 2, which should be 16. So 53 is at index 1, 16 is at index 2. If I press enter, it says the value at index 2 of this specified array is 16. We can also combine row and column for index function. For example, we can say that give me a value in this array. I will select the entire table and I will say that give me a value at row number 5 and column number 2. So row number 5, column number 2 is value 16. So A is column number 1, B is column 2, and so on. Similarly, row 5 is here, so we have row 5 and column 2, the value should be 16. So let's add column 2, close parentheses, and it returns the value 16. So we can use index function for a row based array, column based, or a combination of both, which makes it a matrix. Let me delete this. Another function that we are going to study today is the match function. And match and index together can solve a lot of problems, but let's see match first. What match does is it looks for a value in a specified array and returns the index. So what index did was getting an index of the value and was returning the value itself, but match gets the value and returns the index. So let's see. Equal sign match. The first parameter is lookup value. For example, I am looking for 27 in this specified array, and the match type I'm giving is 0. I want for exact match, and if I press enter, it says that the value 27 in this array is at index 5. So E is index 1, 18 2, 38 3, 12 4, and 27 is at index 5. Similarly, we can give it a row as well. For example, I want to search for this value 19 in this array in the last row, and the match type is 0, which is exact match, and it returns 4. It says that value 19 is at index 4 in this last row. 90 is 1, 35 2, 42 3, and 19 is at 4. So the match function gets a value, returns its index. The index function gets the index and returns the value. Now let's see another example. For example, we have a table of students and their scores. Let's implement the match function first because it returns the index. For example, there is a name of the student like John. I want the index of John from that student array. For example, I put equal sign match. I'm looking for this John in this array of students, and I want the match type to be exact match. Press enter. It says that John is at index 4 of the student array. Because student itself, the column name is at 1, Alice is 2, Bob is 3, and John is 4. Now what I do is I want the name John to appear here. Instead of the index, I want the name John. What I can do is to pass this index to the index function and get the value John. Let me double click to edit this function. This match returns index 4 for John. We know that, we saw the result, and we can see it again. If I press enter, the index is 4. I want to double click again to edit this. Click here. Now I want to pass the result of this match function to index function so I can get the value of John. Instead of getting the index, I can get the name John here. So let me pass index. The array should be this student array, comma, and the index or the row number should be the result of this match, which should make it dynamic. If I close parentheses for both match function and index and press enter, it returns the name John. But here again, I do not need the name John. I need the score for John. So that is simple. I can just double click to edit this. Instead of selecting this array of student names, I can pass it array of score. So let me clean this, and instead of selecting student, I can select this score that you can see on my screen. I selected this score range, and now whenever the match function returns the index for that John, instead of displaying John, index will display the score because we have selected the score array, and the index will be the same. So let's hit enter, and now instead of the index or the name, the function returns 87 for John. We know that John's score is 87. If I change the name to Syria, it updates automatically because the index function returns the index of that name, and the same index is used in this array to get the score of that person or that student name. I hope you have got this. We saw earlier that we can use index function for row-wise array, we can use it for column array, and we can also use it for a matrix. So this is an example of students and their subjects. The subjects are at the column level and student names are in the first column listed. We have the score of each subject for each student written here. What we can do is to get the student name from here and the subject name from here and use the index and match together to find the score of a specific student for a specific subject. For example, I want to get Smith's physics score. So we have Smith in the names, we have it here. We have physics in the column level. Now I want to get this 74, which is a combination of Smith and physics. So what we can do is, let me give it a color. I want to get this value. So we can say that, for example, let me add index first. I want to get value from this array where the row number is 6. We can see that the row number is 6. The column number is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Physics is at 5. And if I close parentheses, it should return 74, and it does. But now I don't want this static function. I want this to be dynamic, to get the student name from here, get the subject from here, and then give me the marks. So instead of giving it values of 6 and 5, what I can do is to find their index using the match function. So for row, I will use match, look up for this student first. In which array? And the student names, and return exact match for that student name that I'm giving under this student. So this will return the row number, comma. Now I want the column number. So for column, I can use another match function, look up for this physics within this array of columns, and give me exact match here as well. So close parentheses for this match, close parentheses for index. If I press enter, it still returns 74. But if I change these parameters, instead of Smith, if I say Helen, it updates the value. If I change physics to English, it returns 88, which is Helen's score for English here. So this is how we can use a combination of index and match for very powerful usage. Let's see a more complicated example. Let's have a look at an advanced example of index and match. Here we do not have one or two criteria, but we have three criteria. We have a data set for cricket example where we have player names listed in column A. Then we have years 2015, 16 and 17, and for each year we have 3 months, January, February and March. What I want to do is to type the player name here, for example Josh Butler, the year in under year, for example 2016, and the month, for example January, and I want to get the score based on these three criteria. We said that we can use index for a matrix, but we haven't seen an example for three criteria. So let's see what we can do here. Let me type equal index. The first array is the entire table. The row number is Josh Butler's index from this list. So what we can do is to add a match, look up for this Josh Butler value, comma, the lookup array is this column A because names are listed there, and the match type is 0. So this will give me the row number. Now for column we have two criteria. Both year and month should be returned. So what we can do is to add the match, and for lookup value not only 2016 but also January should be added. So what we can do is to combine both of them, and we can combine two values by adding an ampersand sign and then adding this value. So I said M2, which is 2016, and N2, which is January. So we are looking for these two values and two arrays. The first value should be looked in this first column. Let me select the range, the entire range, comma, but before comma we need to add an ampersand to select the array for months as well. So the months starts from this player and till the end. Now the match type should be 0, which is exact match, close parenthesis for match, close parenthesis for index, press enter, and it returns 218. What this means that for Josh Butler, let me give it a color, and for year 2016, month January, we have 218, and that's exactly what we want. So if I change the names from Josh Butler, let me add Virat Kohli, and the year is, for example, 2017, January it's 219, and we see that the value is 219. So this is an advanced example of index match together. You can use it for complex scenarios like this as well. Now that the index match is finished, let's move on to filter. Filter is another advanced function of Excel that you can filter a certain range using a certain value. For example, I want to filter this data set for a specific name. Let me add a name here. For example, under name I write John, and I want all the records for John in this data set. So what I can do is to add an equal sign, add filter function, select an array where I want to filter. For example, I click here in John, Control Shift right to select all the values to the right, Control Shift down to select all the data down, and comma, in this array what I want to do is to add a filter. Give me all those values where this name column from start to end is equal to this John. So let me click here because I want to dynamically update this, and then close parentheses. Let's recap. The first range is the entire table. I want to see the data from this entire table, but that should be filtered based on this name column starting from John till the end, and that should be equal to J2. J2 is this John. So give me all the data from this table where the name column has a value of John. If I press enter, it returns all the rows. Similarly, if I update this, I don't want John, I want Olivia. If I press enter, it returns all the data for Olivia. Now let's have a look at an advanced example of filter. For example, I want to see all the sales for this specific name in a specific month. Like for John, I want to sum John's values for February. We have John here, we have it here as well, and we have it here, and so on. So what we can do is to find John's total for February, and we can use a combination of filter and sum here. For example, I want to add a filter in this array. Select entire table, Control Shift right, Control Shift down, comma. In this table, what I want to include is I want to include this column A from start to end, and that should be equal to this John. So let's close this first and see what the result is. We see that it returns all the rows for John, but we do not want to see this. We want to add another filter for month. So what we can do is to pass this function, the result of this filter, to another filter, because we want to filter it for month as well. So let me add another filter, and the range should be the result of this first filter, comma. This time I want to include months. So let me select the row number 1 from start to end, and that should be equal to this February. If I close parentheses again and press enter, it returns all the 5 values for John and February, because we have repeated John for 5 times, and for every John records we have value in February. So it's returning 5 values. Now this is arranged, and we can pass it to sum function to get the total of this. So let me double click again. Now this time the entire result should be passed to sum function. Let me add sum, opening parentheses and close parentheses at the end. Press enter. It says the total for John and February is 735. If I change the name, for example, change it to Mary, the total is 365. Change the month, for example Jan, and the total is 350. This is how you can use combination of filters with sum function to get totals. Now let's have a look at SUMIF function, which is another advanced function in MS Excel used for data analytics. What SUMIF function does, it sums up values based on a condition. For example, here in this table we have health related data, we have weekly OPD visits. For example, there are city names, and then we see the patient type, the age of the patient, and the gender, and then we see a value for every day of this week. Now I want to see the total of New York for a specific day. So what I can do is to go to day total, add equal sign, SUMIF, open parentheses. The range should be this range of names of the cities, and the criteria is this New York. Whatever value is tapped here, give me the sum of that city, and the sum range is which day do I want to calculate. For example, I want to calculate Monday's values. Select the entire range, close parentheses, press enter, and it says that the value is 52 for New York. Yes, if we calculate this total, the total sum is 52. So this is how you use SUMIF for conditional summing or totaling. Another beautiful function we have is SUMIFS, where we can give multiple conditions. Instead of one condition, we can give multiple conditions to get the total. For example, for a specific salesperson from this list and for a specified year, I want to get the total sales. Now let's move on to SUMIFS function. We can use SUMIFS function for adding multiple criteria for summing values. For example, I want to type the salesperson name here like John, the year here, for example 2015, and I want to get the total sales of 2015 for John here. So what I can do is to add equal sign, add the function SUMIFS, and the sum range will be this sales column. So I will click here, and with Control Shift down I will select all the values, comma, what is the criteria range 1, where are you looking for a value? So I'm looking for John and this first column salesperson. So the criteria range 1 is salesperson's entire data. So I will click here in salesperson, and with Control Shift down I will select all the values, comma, what is the criteria, what are you looking for? I'm looking for this John, comma. Now we can add another condition. First we will specify the range, then the criteria. So the range will be year, comma, and the criteria will be 2015. We can add more conditions here and by adding a comma and adding range and criteria, but I will stop here because we have two conditions only. So let me close parentheses, press enter, and now it returns the total for John in 2015. If I filter this, let me add a filter. Remember it's 400, so I will filter for John, and in 2015 it should be 400. If I sum these values, yes, it's 400. So we can use SUMIFS for summing values based on multiple conditions. Let's move on to offset. Offset function is very useful function. For example, if I want to get the total of these, I can just add a sum formula here. But what if I want to get the total of the last 3 months? I can select this and get the total. But what if we add more values? I want the function to be a dynamic function and return the total of the last 3 months from this range. So what I can do is to use offset function here. So let's add equal sign, offset. The first thing we need to add is a reference. For example, the first reference is this first value. How many rows do I want to shift down or move? I want to shift down 3 rows. 1, 2, 3. So it will get to this value, 5,400. So I want to move 3 rows. How many columns? If I add columns, it will move to the right. So I want to add 0 because I do not want to move to the right. I just want to get here to 5,400. And what should be the height and width? The height means from 5,400, how many rows do you want to select? Currently I want to select 1, so we can see the result, then we will move on to the example later. How many width? Width means how many columns to the right do you want to select? I want to select 1. You cannot add 0 here. 1 means that stay in that cell. 1 means stay in that cell. If I close parentheses and press enter, it returns 5,400. I'm moving from the start. This is the reference. I'm moving 3 rows, 1, 2 and 3. So when we move 3 rows, it will get to here, and after that I want to select 1 row and 1 column. It means I want to select this 1 cell. Now what I want to do is to select these 3 rows. Instead of selecting 1 row, I want to select 3. So what I can do is to double click, and for height, instead of 1, I want to add 3. I want to select 3 cells. If I press enter, it will give me 3 cells. These 3 cells. Now if I want to sum these, I can just add a sum here. Sum these 3. It will sum these 3. Yes, the total will be 17,600. Yes, but this is still not dynamic. If I add another cell data here, 2,300, press enter, that is not changing. I want this to change. For each value, I want to get the last 3. So what we can do is to double click and make it dynamic. Instead of moving for 3 rows, I can say that first of all I want to know how many cells are filled. So with that we can use count a function and give it this range to count the filled values. So currently it will return 7 because we have values till July, and from there I want to select 3. So we are here, the result is 7. If we minus 3, that will give me 4, and from 4 if we move 3 rows down, we can get to the last 3 values. What I can do is to deduct 3 from here. So count A will give me 7, minus 3 will give me 4, and in 4 values I want to move 3 rows down and get 3 rows from there. So let's press enter, and it gives 14,500. Let's sum the last three. Yes, it says 14,500. If I add another value 1200, monitor this, it should change. If I press enter, yes, it's changing. So this is how we use offset function to move to a certain range from the current value or the current address. The next function we have is subtotal. Subtotal function has a lot of usages, but currently we are using it for sum. For example, I want to get the sum of this. We can use sum function. For example, sum, give me the total of this, and if I press enter, it will give me the total. But the problem is, if I add a filter, for example, filter this by HR and click OK, HR, still the total is 595, but the total of HR is not 595, it's 123. So sum does not give us the flexibility of automatic updating while we add a filter. Therefore, we use subtotal function for this purpose. Whenever the data is filtered, we want to update the result. So let me clear the filter first and update this function. Add equal sign, subtotal. Now it gives me the flexibility of selecting a function. Which subtotal, which function do you want to use? Do you want to use average, min, max, product, or what? No, I want to use sum. So sum has index of 9. I will add 9 here to select sum, comma. Now give the reference. The reference is this entire range. And close parentheses, press enter. The total is still 595. But this time if I filter this by HR, it should update automatically. This is how we use subtotal function. We can also use it for averages, min and max, and other functions. You can explore those if you want. The next function is SUMPRODUCT function. We use SUMPRODUCT function for multiplying values together and at the end adding them so you can get the sum. For example, let me do it manually first. Let me add a column. I want to sum quantity with price for each product. So what I can do is to add equal sign. I want to multiply 5 with this 10 and get the total. Then I want to drag this down to apply the formula for all of these, and then I can sum these values. Select the range and press enter. It says 415. Now what SUMPRODUCT does, it automatically performs all these tasks in one place. For example, let's add an equal sign, SUMPRODUCT. What is the array? The first array is quantity. The second array is price. And now close parentheses. It automatically performs those tasks and returns 415 for you. So this is how we use SUMPRODUCT. Now I have some tasks for you guys as well. The first task is to use index match function and get the sales for this specific salesperson in this specific month. We have sales data set here. The names of the salespersons are listed on the left side and the month names are in the column level. So use index and match function to find the total sales for Lisa in this March month. Another task for you guys is using SUMIFS. You need to sum values in this data set for John and this specific category. Use SUMIFS function. For example, John has data here. There are three records for John, and in this category, footwear, and footwear, he is selling these products and they are making sales. So what we need to do is to find the sum of footwear category for John from this data set. If I update this to another name or this to another category, this should update automatically. So that's it for today. We will be discussing a few more functions with data validation and some other tasks in the coming video. We are having 3 videos in this week. Thanks for watching.